I'm going to contrast the Gigachad Henry Cavill with the losers Harrison Ford and Samuel L. Jackson. And the contrast is that Henry has integrity and self-respect, and he stands up for the male audience, while these losers right here spit on the male fans, right? Cavill doesn't know his place, and these losers do. Now, he went into the Witcher series, and he's a complete fan of it. And of course, he left the show because he saw they were going to destroy the franchise. The feminists hate Cavill, and this is why. He's a nerd. For one thing, he's not a nerd in the way that he gets female validation, but he is a genuine nerd in that he has nerdy interest, which he is open about and unapologetically open about it. He supports it. Mr. Pink and Yellow said, show this in your video response. He has passed The Witcher 3 several times, right? Grew up playing Half-Life and Total War. Look, prefers staying in playing video games rather than going out. This is the absolute reason they hate it. Feminists hate men if they are not outright harming us. They want us working all the time. And Cavill is basically saying that, hey, I'm prioritizing my own enjoyment over chasing the woman in status. That's what he's saying. And that's the message that makes them so riled. In the meanwhile, Harrison Ford, I think it's a good choice. He's talking about Indiana Jones. I think it's a good choice to leave him in the condition that we see him at the end of the film. Yeah, totally castrated. And he was okay with what they did with, what was it, in not Luke Skywalker, but his role in Star Wars, right? Han Solo. He's completely for the feminists destroying the male roles, right? And look at Jackson, right? Jackson stands by Brie Larson against the toxic male fans. Incel dudes who hate strong women won't destroy her. You see, this man-hater came to him and said, hey, let's get all the white guys together. And of course, him being a good male ally, instead of standing up for himself as a man, he says, good, we can hate on these other men that I don't like. And don't give me anyone about anymore. I don't want to hear any talk about generations. This is the younger generation. These guys are old. He's 80. He's in his mid-70s. So it's the older men who are selling out the younger, not the other way around. Okay. Now, I'm going to look at this video talking about the subject by Kira TV. Thank you, Kira TV, for doing this. And you're going to see what's going on, right?
I have been a fan of the fantasy genre since I was a boy and played the Witcher games. I played The Witcher 3 through twice, and I just wanted to make sure that Geralt was represented as accurately as possible.
Henry William
There
Cavill
you
had
go. He loves the game, says so, and he's proud to say so, right?
But that doesn't tell the whole story as to why fans of The Witcher love him so much. Henry is a nerd at heart, not one posing for brownie points, but truly into the culture.
Well, the first time I got the call, I actually missed it. I was playing World of Warcraft at the time, and I had my priorities straight.
He plays off.
This is why they hate his guts. I had my priorities straight. He loves playing this game. He's happy to say it, unapologetic. He's a man for the well-being of men. Even though that's not his official goal, that's what he's doing. And that's why they hate his guts.
RPGs, loves World of Warcraft, paints miniatures like Warhammer, builds his own gaming PCs, and grew up doing what most of the fans of comic book movies or video game adaptations have been doing.
Wow, this guy is the real McCoy.
Despite looking like the epitome of a Gigachad, Henry Cavill...
Well, this is it too, right? So I bet he'll be called an incel, right? Well, Jackson called all the guys incels, right? This guy can get validation, does have validation from the opposite sex. So when they call you incel guys, they're not saying a guy who can't get laid. What they're saying is a man who doesn't know his place. And as you can see, there are still guys who know their place, right? Right?
The epitome of a Gigachad, Henry Cavill was seen as one of the audience when it came to loving some of the characters and franchises he would later go on to star in, which of course makes him a perfect fit for some of these roles, as he's also a fan, so he's more likely to do it justice.
Yeah, so do you correct people?
I don't necessarily... I am effusive about getting the being loyal to the source material. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, the man has integrity. He loves The Witcher and he wants it shown because he's a fan. And you know something? The other fans appreciate that. So why is he leaving the show? Because the showrunners hate the fans, and they're doing everything in their power to spit in the male fans' faces. Right? That's what's going on in a nutshell.
Okay. Despite this, Henry's initial casting as the White Wolf was met with much criticism. After all, Henry looks nothing like Geralt. Geralt is a rugged man, Henry is handsome. Many fans questioned the casting decision based solely on this fact. Mads Mikkelsen definitely...
Actually, I understand this perfectly. Because if I am in love with a character, I want it to look as closely, the person who plays them, to look as closely to them as you can get.
Nikolai Coster-Waldau, maybe, but Henry Cavill, no thanks, pass. The sentiment on social media was that of skepticism for his ability to take on the role of Geralt, but the woman in charge of the project had a different perspective entirely, and it wasn't based on looks, but on passion.
I disagree. I think this woman wanted to destroy the Witcher, to spit in the male fans. So when she saw those tweets, she said, this guy's the perfect. He doesn't fit the bill. They don't like it. Time to sign him up. That's what her passion is actually about. This is a feminist scumbag.
He was my first meeting. I didn't have writers or scripts yet, just a green light and a lot of passion. That was 4 months ago, and I've never forgotten the passion he brought. He is Geralt. He always has been. I'm so thrilled to welcome Henry Cavill to the #Witcher family.
See, she was so thrilled, but guess what? She lost her thrill when she realized this guy wasn't going to play ball, that he wasn't going to be on her side to wreck the franchise.
But why exactly was she so adamant that Henry was the right man for the job? Well, it comes
because she heard that fans didn't like him. That's why.
Down to persistence. His love for the Witcher video game series led him to do everything in his power to try and get this job. He constantly called his agents and forced them to call the showrunners over and over and over again. Eventually, it worked. He got the meeting before the script had been written, and before casting was even a thought. The seed was planted, and he made a lasting impression. He did that because he knew this role was perfect for him, that he would do it justice as a true fan of the material it was based upon. This turned out to probably be the best decision of the entire production. While fans started out skeptical about his ability to deliver a believable Geralt, his presentation was perfect. He embodied the character on screen, but most importantly, he respected the story too much to compromise, giving fans the assurance that this show would be different than those of the past.
He can't really give that assurance though, because he's not in charge. He did everything in his power, everybody. He butted heads with these people in order to give a good product, and they were against that. Okay? They were absolutely against that.
A rational concern for gaming and book fans when seeing a media adaptation. It's easier to name the ones that have been done well than it is to name the failures, as there are few and far between. Video games especially carry with them a terrible, terrible track record of television shows or movies butchering the initial source material, creating a slap in the face to the original fans, marketing themselves to a fan base that simply doesn't exist. Writers and producers without respect for the original work, thinking they know better and trying to use the media as a vehicle to tell their own stories instead of the ones fans come to expect. And
but just to correct you here, Kira TV, They're not trying to write their own stories. They're trying to destroy the franchise. So there you go.
Already love. The Witcher Season 1 was of course far from perfect, but one thing fans could agree upon is that Henry Cavill was doing the role justice. Even if the story deviated a tolerable amount, he was going to carry the show the whole time, no matter what. Unfortunately, things behind the scenes were starting to go wrong. There were decisions being made that would put everything at risk, decisions that might even kill the entire show.
Not might. This isn't a risk. Kira, they are working to destroy the franchise, and they did. You know, you've got to understand what the motivation is.
During the filming of Season 2, it became clear that lines were being drawn in the sand. Working conditions were becoming difficult, with constant conflict. Season 2 released, and fans noticed this on screen. People who had played the video games, but more importantly the people who had read Sapkowski's books, were becoming more and more disillusioned with the direction. The shift of narrative was clear, things were not really making sense. The source material was being disrespected or outright ignored.
Did I just tell you that? Exactly. And no fan should be surprised at this time, right?
The numbers, however, the people viewing, were still good, which allowed for a Season 3 greenlight from Netflix, and the ability to perhaps steer the ship to safer waters if, of course, fan input was heard. Unfortunately, during production of Season 3, Henry Cavill took...
It's because fan input was heard that this is happening. These feminist monsters will hear what men like, and they say, that's what we're not going to give you. So it didn't matter what the input was.
To social media and announced his departure from the project. From the outside, this seemed incredibly out of the blue. After all, why would a man who fought tooth and nail to get himself cast in this role give it up when the show was going to continue on without him? How could he do that to himself, to the show, and to the fans who saw him?
Well, it's very easy. He's doing the best thing. He's not in charge. In the end, they're going to do what they want to do. They're going to destroy this franchise. He could see it. So he did the best thing he could. He left the show. He left the show. Unlike this laydown right here. Now.
As Geralt and entirely irreplaceable. Immediately, the internet rumor mills came to life, and theories were being tossed around as to why exactly this happened. One common speculation at the time was that due to DC's push to compete with Marvel, Henry's much more...
They're going to explain that's not the case, right? Matter of fact, here, this guy here is going to explain. This is, I believe, a writer of the show.
He was no longer playing Geralt. In a social media post, one of the Witcher show writers took to Instagram to end speculation. Bo DeMayo said, quote, "I've been on shows, namely Witcher, which some of the writers were not fans or actively disliked the books and games, even actively mocking the source material."
Now, why would they mock the source material? The source material is about a male protagonist who's heroic. And these feminists hate men. So that's why they mock it. And that's what's always being left out about this, everyone.
It's a recipe for disaster and bad morale. Fandom as a litmus test checks egos and makes all the long nights worth it. You have to respect the work before you're allowed to add to its legacy.
Well, if that's the case, you have to kick out all the feminists. Do you understand? You got to kick them out because they're hate mongers. They'll only make things that are harmful. Okay?
A bold claim that showrunner Lauren responded
to. Oh, by the way, guys, I want you to take a look at Lauren here. I also want to kill this idea that all these feminists are ugly, dyed hair, tattooed. This is a gorgeous woman. Look at the legs on that. So actually, the better looking the woman, the more feminine she is the one that's most likely to hate men and show it.
To directly ending her message with, quote, "Don't believe everything you read." Fans again were given the bread.
Yeah, this is gaslighting, right? She's doing this on purpose, so she knows that guy spoke the truth. So she openly lies. Feminists are liars, 100%.
Come trail to follow. Before Henry had even announced his departure, it was clear the show was veering towards its own path, away from respecting the books. With this added testimony on social media, it was starting to make a whole lot more sense. Henry's quote about staying for at least 7 seasons, remember, ended with, quote, as long as we can keep telling great stories which honor Sapkowski's work. To Henry,
there you go. So he was fighting to respect the work. He shows integrity, and he wasn't playing ball, right?
they were no longer respecting this work. At this point, people started to dissect old interviews from Henry and saw that he was even publicly discussing how hard he'd had to fight to get certain elements of Geralt from the books into the show. Quote, "This season, I really wanted to make sure that we represented the book's Geralt more accurately, and that we saw him speak more. I pushed really, really hard for that."
Yeah, but he shouldn't have to fight for this, right? If these were honest, production makers, for lack of a better word, they would listen to everything he says, said, yeah, because it doesn't cost them anything to do it right. So they're resisting him on purpose because they want to do it wrong.
As well as later when he discussed some of his favourite scenes from the books being cut entirely from the season. Quote, "It was such a shame, a lovely bit from Blood of Elves had been left out of season 2. He tried to do it justice, of course, by improvising part of that scene during the death of Roach, Geralt's horse." Henry doing things like this didn't seem to go down well in the writer's room. At the very beginning, they lovingly called Henry a walking Witcher encyclopedia. Remember, Lauren publicly said that he was Geralt. He was born for this role.
Yeah, that's when she thought he was going to be one of these laydowns like Ford and Jackson. But he turned out to be a man of self-respect, right?
So originally, this was good, to have an actor so incredibly engrossed in his role to strive for perfection. But now that the writers wanted to veer...
But he wasn't striving for perfection. He was striving for accuracy.
...away from that and tell their own stories, using the books as a vehicle for their own ideas, the walking encyclopedia was now a problem. During the fan backlash, which lasted months and is probably still ongoing at this point, writers from The Witcher went on the offensive. Leaks were being published about Henry Cavill, claiming that he's, quote, toxic, misogynistic, and a stereotypical gamer.
Do you see that, guys? Henry Cavill is a misogynist. And of course, gamers are toxic, right? Because gamers are mainly men, no matter what people try and say. Because gamers are men, they are toxic. And the misogynistic word is the exact same thing as incel. It means man who doesn't know his place.
The claims were that Henry and the now fired writer, who were both big fans of the games and books, were...
Wow. So the writer was fired, right? Because he's a big fan. Do you see? It has nothing to do... They don't mention why the writer was fired beyond that, right? At least not in this video. So that's what it is. These guys wanted to respect the male audience, and these creators wanted to do the opposite. That's what the motivation is. Everyone has to understand that.
Fighting to keep things true, and it was them versus the world. The world just so happened in this example to have been mostly female. They claim that this weird alliance of two men...
Thank you for admitting that. So against the world meant mainly female. Right. So this is a gender divide. Of course. It's women hating on men. I want to hear that again.
Just so happened in this example to have been mostly female. They claim that this weird alliance of two men were forcing changes on the regular and ignoring the female crew, which included writers and directors.
No, they weren't ignoring the female crew. What they were doing is they weren't letting the female writers wreck the property. And these female writers were wrecking the properties because they're female and they see us guys as the opponents of the other team. They're hate mongers.
This led to many complaints to Human Resources, and Henry was allegedly...
Yeah, see, Human Resources is... The purpose of that is to get men fired at women's words. That's why it is made. It should be renamed Women in Charge.
Repeatedly warned. He ignored those warnings and continued his, quote, toxic demeanor, which led to Netflix firing him, but allowing him to state he was stepping away publicly. The words in the report...
There you go. That's all we need to know. Thank you again, Kira TV. I'll listen ahead to see if there's anything else we need to know, but I don't think we do. Henry Cavill is a true blue, honest nerd who stands up for the stuff he loves, who loves geeky interest, who prioritizes his own loves above status chasing. And he fought tooth and nail to make something that men loved. And these feminist scumbags. Here, let me see if I can't get her up here. This feminist scumbag hates his guts and had to get him fired. And there's not going to be any more art worth watching as long as these feminist scumbags are in charge. And they've infiltrated everything. They've infiltrated television and magazines and news outlets and movies. They've got it all. And the only thing that's going to save guys if there's a huge purge of these monsters. That's what they are. This is a monster. She's not a person. She's a monster. And she needs to be purged, kicked out, that is, of any place of authority. Because they can only do harm. But I'm not going to end off like that. I'm going to end off saying, again, Cavill is the Gigachad. Harrison Ford and his buddy Jackson are losers. They're punks. Jackson, you are a punk. Ford, you are a punk. Gigachad.